Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I am streaming to you from beautiful Victoria on the west coast of Canada. I hope everybody has had a great week and is looking forward to a fantastic weekend. I hope you're all staying healthy, staying strong, and optimistic. Welcome Charmin. Hi Anatoly. Welcome Manish. Ashisher, very good to have many of our regular students in the class. Welcome Arda. Hello members, good to have you here with me today. In this class, we are looking at IELTS Task 1 writing, specifically focusing on a Band 9 line graph example. And as usual, this class is presented to you by aehelp.com. That's academicenglishhelp.com. For lots more help with your academic IELTS, visit us there. If you haven't yet, definitely check out our premium course. It is well worth your investment. For the general IELTS, check us out at IELTShelp.com, where we have resources for the general version of the test, including Task 1 videos there. I'll quickly show you what these websites look like while we wait for a few more of your fellow students. This is our academic IELTS website at aehelp.com. We're an official British Council IELTS test registration center and certified agents. And you can click that big red button to join our premium package. Akash, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. All right. General IELTS looks very similar as the academic, but with a green background. You can click that big red button to join us there. And of course, you can download our apps, Academic IELTS Help and General IELTS Help, and you can link those to the websites. And if you want to see something different, check out a new YouTube channel that we started called Fun Run. Search for Fun Run channel. Be fit for IELTS. Fitness and education go hand in hand. So check out that channel, and it's a channel for charity to help students study around the world. So it's great to check that out. And if you have questions about our products or about the exam or English, send me an email to adrian@aehelp.com. Students, we have a couple more classes tomorrow as well, so make sure you're here for those. Q&A for members, speaking part 3 for everyone. And here is our task 1 writing question for the day. Welcome to our moderator, Carolina, as well. Carolina, could you put the URL up, please, for our Fun Run channel, just in case somebody wants to check that out a little bit later on? They can just click on that. Okay, meanwhile, let's get into task 1 writing. So task 1 writing for the academic IELTS, it's 20 minutes of writing. It's an expository essay, meaning that you have to explain the information that you see. And it is going to be either a pie chart, a line graph, a bar graph, a diagram, a map. Okay, it will be one of these, or maybe a flow chart. They usually change it up, so don't try to predict. Make sure to practice all of them. Today we're practicing the line graph. And you have to write at least 150 words, okay? Now, students, keep in mind that Band 8, Band 9 essays for Task 1 are in most cases closer to 220 words, okay? So 150 words is the absolute minimum, but do keep in mind that Band 8 and 9 Task 1 essays are usually closer to 220 words. Okay? Just so you have an idea about that. Okay? Thanks, Manish. I appreciate that comment. All right. Okay, so your first step, okay, when you get to your writing section, start with task 1. Don't start with task 2. Start with task 1. It'll get you warmed up. And when you know what you're doing, it is the easier essay, okay? So tip 1 is start with task 1, okay? You can start with task 2 if you so choose, but I don't recommend it. Okay, so start with task 1. It is easier than task 2 when you know what to do, because all the information is there. So we could say it's like less thinking. And more writing, okay? So it'll get you going on your writing. Okay, and then step 1 is read the question carefully and start your introduction by paraphrasing the question with more details, okay? Using the chart. All right, so paraphrasing means using your own words. So let's read this question. Let's take a look at this chart. All right, here we go. So IELTS task 1 writing. Read with me, everyone. So do this with me. Don't just see me as like this entertainer that's jumping around in front of the camera, but be active, be a part of the lesson, okay? So read with me, do this with me. Okay, so here we go. IELTS task 1 writing. The following graph shows the number of flu cases in a given sample for a specific year for both men and women. Describe the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Now, when I read this kind of question, I always go, okay, so the following graph, sure, what kind of graph? Okay, it's a line graph. Number of flu cases. Okay, so how many flu cases in this given sample? Let's see that. So here's the graph. Okay, so flu rates for males and females. Females indicated by the red line, males indicated by the blue line. So this seems to be a flu that affects women a little bit more than men right away. And then, okay, so number of cases, right? So how many, right? And then for the number of cases, we're looking at the y-axis, okay? So this vertical axis is called your y-axis, okay? It's good to know that. And it goes from 0 to 4,000 with intervals of 500. Okay, so if this is a new word for you, make sure to learn it. Intervals of 500. Okay, so the maximum cases is 4,000. So good. So that's kind of the more detailed information I'm thinking about as soon as I'm reading this. So flu cases in a given sample for a specific year. Is there another way to say the word flu? Pop quiz. So let's see how much you're really thinking about this. Okay, so what's another way to say flu? Or what's a different way to say flu? Can anybody tell me real quick? Good luck, Ramneek, on your exam. Yeah, I know it's coming up. Okay, so July says it could be a cold. A cold isn't necessarily a flu, but Irene Paulson says, yeah, well, the full word for flu is influenza. Yeah, absolutely. So you want to think about that, okay? So instead of writing flu, you can write influenza. That is the full word. Absolutely. Okay, very good. Lucas came up with that as well. So Lucas says, why not call it the full word influenza and impress the examiner? Yeah, so 0 to 4,000 influenza in a given sample, sure, for a specific year. So as soon as I see specific year, I go, okay, well, what year, right? So I'm sure the graph is going to tell me that. And bada bing, bada boom, bada bang, it's 1996, okay? February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So interesting, it's 11 months. We have January missing, which is noteworthy. We might want to mention that at some point, but it's 11 months of 1996 from February to December. Okay, so I'm paying attention to the title of my axes. I'm also paying attention to the data here. Okay, so this is my interval data on my x-axis. It's the day, or sorry, the months of the year. Okay. All right, Shushma, 7.5 band on the IELTS overall is fantastic. Good job. Okay, so now that I have all of this information, I can write my introduction. Okay, the introduction for task 1 is short, and again, it's a paraphrase of the question with these details that I just showed you. Okay, so read the question carefully, start your introduction by paraphrasing the question with more details. Okay, don't make mistakes on the introduction of task 1 because that looks really bad. It's the start of your entire writing section. If you make mistakes at the very, very beginning, it looks terrible. So careful, be extra careful with spelling, double, triple check. Okay, all right, so let's do it. So here it says the following graph. So now I'm just putting it together. So this line graph, okay, I'm not going to say given graph because we know it's given. You don't have to say the given graph, okay? You can, it's not terrible, but just say the given graph, or sorry, just say the line graph, okay? So what type of graph? So the line graph shows, you can always have a million different ways to say that. So the line graph illustrates influenza cases from 0 to 4,000 with intervals of 500 in 11 months of 1996 from February to December for both males and females. All right. So there we go. And that's nice and fast. When you practice it, it becomes quick. So again, all I did here was I just put together what we discussed, right? Looking at the line graph, giving that more detail and paraphrasing this sentence. So the following line graph, or sorry, the following graph shows the number of flu cases in a given sample for a specific year for both men and women. This line graph illustrates influenza cases from 0 to 4,000 with intervals of 500 and 11 months of 1996 from February to December for both males and females for a given group. Okay, group would be in this case for a given sample. All right. Nerd Gamer, love the handle. Nerd Gamer says the line graph depicts the number of flu cases for a specific year for both males as well as females. Nerd Gamer, you're lacking detail. Notice my detail. 0 to 4,000, intervals of 500, 1996. If you just paraphrase, like Nerd Gamer, if that's all that you do for your introduction is you just paraphrase the question, you're getting a band 6, maybe a 6.5. Okay, you're not getting into the band 7, 8 category. Okay, Sudarshan, yeah, we'll definitely look at the graph here again. Okay, so Ashishir says the line graph illustrates the number of both males and females infected by influenza throughout 11 months of the year 1996. Okay, Ashishir, that's better. So more detail there. June writes, this line graph depicts the influenza rates for both males and females in the year 1996 over the course of 11 months from February to December. The y-axis ranges from 0 to 4,000 with intervals of 500 cases. Very nice, June. That's some very nice technical writing. That's what you need to do. Okay. Deepika writes, the line graph depicts the flu rates in a given population, including men and women, in the year 1996 with the numbers on the y-axis and the months on the x-axis. Deepika, that's pretty good too. I like it. Okay. Capitalize that T. And put a comma after population and after 1996. You're creating an additive clause there. So make sure to put commas on both sides of that clause. Vashu, I'm giving you tips this entire hour for task 1. So, and for lots more tips, Vashu, check out aehelp.com if you're doing academic IELTS and gltshelp.com if you're doing general IELTS, okay? So that's my best tip, is check out those websites of ours, okay? All right, so that is the beginning of our task 1 response for this line graph. Let me just cut that. Actually, you know what? Let me, instead of cutting it, just copy it. Now we'll put that here as the introduction. Okay, and then we'll continue on with the overview. So the overview is basically the main feature. So, or main features, if it's plural. Okay, there could be main features. So the question for task 1 always says describe the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Basically, you can think about it like describe the main features is your overview, and make comparisons where relevant is your big body paragraph. It's your analysis or analyses of the task 1. Okay. All right. So the overview is the most observable feature. And without having to look at numbered data, usually, okay? So basically for the main feature, you should be able to just see the main feature by looking at the visual imagery of the graph. Let's take a look at that. So here we have our graph, okay? What is the most observable feature in this graph without looking at the data? Okay, so what's the most observable? Okay, so if I look at this and I ask 10 scientists, okay, what do you see? What's the most observable kind of main feature here? What do you see? What's the most observable? What jumps out at you? What's like, well, bam, there it is. Okay, well, that looks really, yeah, obvious. Okay. So let's see. Akshay, yeah, very good. So Akshay says similar pattern. Akshay, I guess you mean for men and women. Yeah, so very nice. Yeah, so here we have females, it's the red line, and then here we have males, it's the blue line, and it looks quite similar. So we can almost say that these two trends are parallel. Okay, so they appear almost parallel for males and females. Okay. All right. Shoryu, I don't speak Hindi. I'm not sure where you got that from. All right. But anyway, these two lines, they seem almost parallel. Okay. And what else do we see? So we see this parallel. And we see that females are more than males for this year, right? So it's parallel. Females are more, or more cases, right? Because at every given point, females seem to have a greater instance of flu cases, with the exception of February, where they kind of all seem to start at 0, which is fine. Okay, so maybe it was some kind of an outbreak. And then what else do we see? So let's see, did anybody catch? Parneet says both lines show an upward trend. Not really, Parneet. Careful with information mistakes. We see an upward trend here, but we see a downward trend here, and we see a flattening here, right? So it's not an upward trend. We see an increase in flu cases in the first half of the year, and then we see a decrease in the second half. So that's the third point, okay? So if we want to be really clever in our main feature, our overview here, these are basically the 3 points that you should observe. So number one, you should observe that for both males and females, the trends are similar. The lines are showing a parallel pattern, okay? The second point that you should observe is that females throughout the course of 1996 seem to have more cases of flu than males at any given month, okay? And then the third point that you should observe is that for the first half of the year, there seems to be a drastic increasing trend, and then for the second half of the year, there seems to be a decreasing trend, okay? Everybody sees that? That's what you should be looking at, okay? All right, so let's report those 3 main features before getting into the analysis. All right, write the overview, everyone. I'm going to write the overview as well. I've given you all the information, or we've deciphered all the information, and then we can compare. Okay, so we can compare the information afterwards. Ramnik says, I just wrote that. All right, Ramnik, if you just wrote that, that's fantastic. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. There's a lot of chatter going on, but if you did, that's great. Okay, so at first glance, it is clear that both men and women show a similar parallel pattern of flu cases throughout the year, with women having more cases than men in any given month. Furthermore, it is evident that there is a rapid upward trend in infections in the first half of 1996, and then a decrease in the second half of this annum. Okay, so here, pick up this vocabulary, pick up this writing. This is what you want to do to get that Band 8, Band 9 score, okay? So at first glance, let's follow that with a comma, because that is an introductory statement, okay? So it's a leading expression. So at first glance, it is clear that both men and women show a similar parallel pattern of flu cases throughout the year, with women having more cases than men in any given month. Furthermore, it is evident that there is a rapid upward trend in infections in the first half of 1996, and then a decrease in the second half of this annum. Annum meaning year. It's a paraphrase, okay? Jas writes, at first glance, comma, it is clear that the trend of both males and females affected by influenza is quite similar, whereas the number of men are more as opposed to females throughout the given period. Jas, it's females are more than men, and affected in your sentence should be the verb form, so A-F-F-E-C-T-E-D, not E-F-F, okay? Careful with that. So affect, verb, affect with an E, noun, okay? Akshay writes, at first glance, it is clear that the graph for males and females has almost a similar pattern. Instead of saying graph, Akshay, you should write trend, okay? The entire graph is the graph. Makes more sense to write trend, okay, or pattern, okay? Those are better words. Deepika says, noticeably, or Deepika writes, noticeably, females were more affected by flu than males, but the trends are similar among both, between both, because it's two. Males, females, it's between. Two, between, three or more, among. Okay, Deepika? With cases peaking in June and then decreasing towards December. Okay, that's good, Deepika. Yeah, you can write that as well. All right. So, Rashika says the two lines show a similar parallel pattern of flu cases. Females infected, the female infection rate was more throughout the year and peaked in the same month, regardless of gender. Okay, Rashika, a couple of mistakes there, so be careful. All right? Upsurge UV is okay. So UV 302 is asking if we can use an upsurge. So in the first half of the year, there was an upsurge in flu cases. You can definitely use that in this context. UV, good question. So upsurge is a good vocabulary to use. Vocabulary alone, students, will not get you a high band score. It is important, but you need much more than just vocabulary. Okay. All right. Good work, everyone. So this is the introduction, the overview, and now we go into the body paragraph, which is your analyses. Okay. Your body paragraph is your analyses. And what you want to do is make sure to mark your points of comparison before you start. Okay. So you go back to the graph and then you mark your points of comparison. All right. Now, what you can do is use your overview as your thesis statement. Okay, so as your thesis statement. So the first point in our overview is that the pattern is similar. Okay, so the pattern is similar, and there are more female cases than male cases. So first of all, we want to describe this similar pattern. So that's my first point, and that's what I'm going to analyze first. So in February, we have 0 cases for both men and women, okay? And then the cases of flu start to kind of increase here with both, okay? So the pattern is the same, and there are more cases of female infections here than male. So here, all I'm going to do is just kind of draw a line for the females and then draw a line for the males, okay? And all I'm doing here is kind of getting an average difference between men and women. So I'm not going to describe the difference between all these points, but I just want to describe kind of what is the average difference between the rate of males versus the rate of females, okay? So we can see that each one of these is 500 cases, okay? And we can see that the difference at these peak points, so this is going to be a bit more than 500, a bit less than 500. Now, I'm not going to calculate these differences, okay? But I would imagine, I would argue that if we did the math on these two lines, then we would end up with an approximate difference of about 500 cases. Does everybody agree with me on that? So this is where IELTS is not just an English exam. It is a thinking exam, especially academic. Obviously, if IELTS were just an English exam, you wouldn't have this kind of a question. Okay, so yeah, UV agrees. UV says it's about 500. So the average difference in flu cases throughout the year is roughly 500. So that would be my number 1 point for analysis, okay, is going into more detail about my first point in the overview and explaining to the reader that the patterns are the same, and looking at it in more detail, the average female cases throughout the year are roughly 500 more cases of influenza than men. Okay, that's number one. All right. Okay, so now the second part of my overview is this increasing trend in the first half of the year, so until June, and then this decreasing trend here, okay? So depending on my writing fluency, how quick I am, that will decide how much detail I go into, okay? So we can see that in February there were 0 cases, and then from February, March to April, we get about 1,000 cases for women and about 500 or just over 500 cases for men. Now then, so that would be my second point. Now then there's a very quick uptake here from April to June. So there's a spike. Men spike to 2,600 cases roughly, and women spike to 3,500 cases, okay? Which is more than threefold of this period here. Then at this point, there's a decrease, which is a gradual decrease until September. So that would be my fourth point. And then we see a flattening to the end of the year, okay, roughly to December, with 1,500 cases for men and about 2,500 cases for women. So that would be my fifth point. Okay, and ideally that's what you have for your task 1 academic IELTS. You have about 5 to 6 points for your analysis. Okay, everybody see that. Okay, so using words like plummeted, Raj Patel, it's okay. This would not be considered a plummet. This would be a gradual decrease. A plummet would be like this, okay, or like this. That would be a plummet. This is not a plummet. Okay, using words like plummet alone will not get you a good band score on the IELTS, especially not on academic. Okay. Deepika, the essay should definitely be in the past tense when we're referring to the information because it is 1996. So yes, if we're referring to the graph, it's present tense. If we're referring to the year, then it's past tense, okay? The graph is current, it's present, we're looking at it now, and the year is the past, it's 1996, okay? So that's a good question. All right, so let's do this. Let's go with number 1. So firstly, describing the pattern in more detail between men and women for this year. Okay, so let's do that. And then we'll go into each of those other 4 points. So do the same. Start with number 1 for the analyses, and then we'll go from there. So in more detail. Okay, so here we go. In more detail, although the flu cases for men and women follow a similar trend, the average number of viral infections is on average approximately 500 more cases for females than males. So that describes that point number 1 that we were talking about. and that first point in the overview. Okay. All right. Nyok Yen, I see that you can't hear me. If anybody else can't hear me, let me know. Rashika says, at deeper inspection, not infection. Rashika, I think you're jumping ahead. Female infection rates were dominant throughout the year, showing roughly 500 more cases on average than males. Rashika, average is very important, okay? In more detail, although the flu cases for men and women follow a similar trend, I'm rushing along a little bit here, and Kai Chan says you're using average twice. Yeah, that would. So I have to be careful here and fix that. Okay, so the average number of viral infections is approximately, speaking, teaching, reading, comments. Sometimes my brain wanders. But yeah, there we go. So let's fix that. The average number of viral infections is approximately 500 more cases for females than males. Okay? All right. So now we look at the specific data for each month. Okay? So we're looking at this February to April segment. Okay? So let's talk about that. That's number 2. So, okay, so observing the months, it is evident that in February, both genders, so instead of writing males and females, had 0 cases, and this number started to gradually increase to April. And what happened in April? At which time 1,000 women and just over 500 men were affected. Okay? Okay, so there we go, and there's your past tense. So observing the months, it is evident, and because this is now, we're observing the months on the graph, that February, both genders had 0 cases, because now we're referring to the time, and this number had started to gradually increase to April, at which time 1,000 women and just over 500 men had caught the flu. Okay, so past tense there. All right. There was a sharp increase in the contraction of influenza. Okay, you contract a disease. So many people know the word you get the flu. I got the flu, okay, or I had the flu, to have the flu. But more specifically, you contract the flu. So contract is the more academic verb for getting the flu. You contract the flu, okay? 10, the first sentence of this does not have to be in the past. Let's see. Yeah, so here I'm using the present tense. Very good question, 10. I'm using the present tense because I'm referring to the graph The average in the graph is current. It's right now. I'm looking at it, okay? So I'm not using the past tense. Again, when you're referring to the graph, use the present tense because it's the general truth. This graph will be the same tomorrow as it is today. When you're referring to the time in the graph, the year or the months, use the past tense, okay? So, again, at which time 1,000 women and just over 500 men had caught the flu. There was a sharp increase in the contraction of influenza from April to June, with numbers peaking at, let's see, 3,500 for women, and around 2,600 for men. 3,500 for women. So numbers peaking at 3,500 for women and about 2,600 for men. Following this summer month, the cases gradually started to decrease until September, right? You're at September, and then began to level out over the next 3 months till the end of the year. Okay? Increase until September and began to level out for the remainder of 1996 at 2,500 for women and 1,500 for men. Okay, so there we go. Now, I want to review this and read it and make sure that it makes sense. Here we go. In more detail, although the flu cases for men and women follow a similar trend, the average number of viral infections is approximately 500 more cases for females than males. Observing the months, it is evident that in February both genders had 0 cases, and this number had started to gradually increase to April, at which time 1,000 women and just over 500 men had caught the flu. There was a sharp increase in the contraction of influenza from April to June, with numbers peaking at 3,500 for women and about 2,600 for men. Following this summer month, the cases gradually started to decrease until September and began to level out for the remainder of 1996 at 2,500 ill women and 1,500 ill men. Okay, that looks good. Now, if I'm really shooting for the stars and I want to get a band 9, so I will include a summary. Okay. And the summary is a clear, observable fact or two that we can infer from the graph. Okay, so in summary, what can we infer from this graph? So from this graph showing this flu rate for this sample in 1996, what can we infer? So what can we tell our reader that we kind of learn from this graph? Okay. What can we summarize about it? Let's see if you come up with some of the same ideas that I have in my head when we look at this graph. Okay? So Charmin says, in summer, the infection increased drastically. So going towards summer. Yeah. Okay. Nick Hayman says the flu rate varies between genders and seasons. Okay. Very good. Yeah. So we can definitely see that the seasons seem to have some kind of an impact on the flu rate. So whether it's summer or winter, there seems to be a different rate for this type of flu, so for this strain of flu virus. And we can also summarize, or we can also infer that women seem to be a bit more susceptible, okay? So a bit more vulnerable for this strain of flu than men, okay? That's what we can infer. So if you were a virologist, a specialist in the influenza, or epidemiologist, then you would make these inferences looking at this graph. So you would say, in summary, one may infer that women were slightly more vulnerable to this strain of influenza than men, and the changing seasons impacted the number of cases. Okay, so that would be your summary. Does everybody see that? Okay, I'm not the only one that saw that. And a couple others in the chat, I see that they saw that. Okay. June, so northern and southern hemisphere it affects whether it's the summer or winter, but I wouldn't get lost in that. I'm more in the northern hemisphere, and this is where I'm writing the IELTS exam, so I wouldn't worry about that level of technicality, okay? If you're writing it in the southern hemisphere, maybe write winter. If you're writing it in the northern hemisphere, write summer, okay? All right, I think it's being a bit too technical, so being in Canada, I wouldn't worry about that too much. That's definitely not going to be the deal breaker on your score, okay? All right, so let's read over this and make sure it's all good. So introduction, this line graph illustrates influenza cases from 0 to 4,000 with intervals of 500 in 11 months of 1996, from February to December for both males and females for a given group. At first glance, it is clear that both men and women show a similar parallel pattern of flu cases throughout the year, with women having more cases than men in any given month. Furthermore, it is evident that there is a rapid upward trend in infections in the first half of 96 and then a decrease in the second half of this annum. In more detail, although flu cases for men and women follow a similar trend, the average number of viral infections is approximately 500 more cases for females than males. Observing the months, it is evident that in February, both genders had 0 cases, and this number had started to gradually increase to April, at which time 1,000 women and just over 500 men had caught the flu. There was a sharp increase in the contraction of influenza from April to June, with numbers peaking at 3,500 for women and about 2,600 for men. Following this summer month, the cases gradually started to decrease until September and began to level out for the remainder of 96 at 2,500 ill women and 1,500 ill men. In summary, one may infer that women were slightly more vulnerable to this strain of influenza than men, and the changing seasons impacted the number of cases. That's it, and you're done, okay? And I'm probably closer to about 250 words maybe on this essay, but again, Band 8, Band 9, Task 1 essays are almost always longer than 150 words. They're closer to 220, okay? Lena's asking, can we say all in all, more females got infected with the flu in comparison to men? and they both showed similar trends. Lena, that summary is okay, but it's kind of just a repeat of your introduction. So for a good summary, try to go beyond just a repeat of the introduction. Okay? All right, everyone. So that's it for today's class. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, to avoid the influenza, exercise is important. So if you would like to exercise on your treadmill, check out our new channel, Fun Run. It's a channel that I've created. I like running. It's kind of my hobby. And this channel is for charitable fitness. Carolina, our moderator, has really been helpful creating this new exciting project as well. So check that out when you have some free time. You get to see me run in different parts of the world. It's kind of exciting. And for academic IELTS, visit our academic IELTS website at aehelp.com. And for general IELTS, visit us at gieltshelp.com. And you can click on that big red button to join our premium package. It's well worth it. You are very welcome, Rashika. Ramneek, good luck on your exam. Good contributions today, UV. Okay. Kai Tran, having a summary will give you a better band score as long as it's a good summary. Okay. If you have 180 words, you're definitely going to be closer to a band 8 than if you have 150. That was a good question by somebody. All right, students, I will be back tomorrow with questions and answers for our members and a speaking part 3 class for everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day, a great start to your weekend. I'm Adrian, signing out from beautiful Victoria for now. Bye, everyone.